Well, let's revisit this little guy. Another 8 by 10 inch wood panel. And you'll see some of these lines are darker than others. It's because they're fresh. I just put them on. I decided to make it even more complicated. Well, okay, let's put it this way. I like things simple, certainly on a study size panel. This will be more of a painting than a panel, or than a study. It's still going to be a study. And yeah, we all know that nothing keeps things more simple than making them more complicated. So that's my reasoning, sound as it is. So I'm just going to use this little number 4 brush here. And we're looking through the woods this time. And I'm not going to focus too much on the distant scene, although this will be the focal area. Again, it's another sort of somewhat decorative piece. So I don't have to worry too much about having, only one intense area. We can spread it around a little bit. I'm using yellow ochre, cobalt blue, and titanium white at the moment. And if I have the wherewithal and the steadiness of hand this morning, I'm going to try to avoid getting too caught up in the details. Again, even though it's a brush, I still like to somewhat provide the nature of a study here. We'll see how that works. We'll see if it works at all. I have to go into this with the willingness to be able to just let it go as a failure. I have a reasonably good track record, but it probably only helps that I'm willing to let it go if it doesn't work out well. Now, do I want some sky still up there? I don't know. I think I might just run into some bush up here in the background. This is the shade under the canopy of this tree. Our light's coming from the left-hand side. And I think that provided the values are high enough over here, we don't have to worry about using this space as sky. I think we can just pretend it's sort of somewhat distant bush there. Now, I think I might also allow just one spot of sky showing through there. And, I'm going to something I'm not fond of with this shape either, so I'm just going to break it off. And we'll do one other one there. For the time being, I can always go back into it. Okay, let's get rid of this. Let's change our color a little bit. Actually, not a whole lot though. We're going to go back to our cobalt blue. Now we're going to go with a little bit of alizarin crimson. Trying to keep the values up, slightly lower than what's in the sky, but not going too dark. We don't want to go too dark. That's not quite dark enough. I'm adding a touch of yellow ochre to it. That tree is way too fat. Way too fat. Much too poorly. So I wanted the value a little bit lower where purple meets blue, but now I can raise the value again a little bit as we come closer with a few strokes. Trying to keep track of where my shapes are supposed to be. And I inevitably will lose track of it a little bit here and there. I'm not too worried about it. Dipping into more yellow ochre here. I think I'd like to have a branch coming off of this. Just this rogue branch coming out of this tree as well. Okay. Yeah, I think we can do that. And that. And that. I'm just going to give the brush a wipe. I'm not going to clean it with turpentine or anything, but I'm going to go with some yellow ochre and some cad red, some white. Try to dump a few stronger strokes in here. Just showing that we do truly have some sunshine hitting things there behind the trees. A little more yellow ochre. Oops. Kind of have to be careful not to overload the brush. You know what? It can make for a good effect if you overload the brush. But that's not what I'm after. I've seen a lot of people do it and it can look fantastic. But you end up with a bit of a different technique. A little more impasto, obviously. Yeah, we'll do that. A little more red there. All right. Let's see. Okay, we'll give the palette a wipe again here. A scrape and a wipe. Let me back up a moment. I need to give my eyeballs a quick break. Back up and have another look back at it. Okay. Now, I guess the next plane, the next visual plane would be cutting in and doing all these little bits and bobs of branches, I think for the moment, I'm going to ignore them and we're going to come into just this area here and establish that. Which will be, I think I'll use a bit of ultramarine blue. And some burnt sienna. Okay, I need more burnt sienna on my palette. There we go. I know I was going to use this larger brush on this, but I ended up with so many small details I decided no. I think that's a little The brush would be a little too large. Okay, that's fairly high value. Let's not do that. We would like a bit of a silhouette. From these colors to these colors. Okay, I could stand to add a bit of white to that, I think. Of course, I'm tempted to say, I don't want an area to be too monochromatic. And when people, when the term monochromatic is used, it's often intended to mean, or it's often intended to describe monohue, one color. And you can't, well, okay, I guess if you live in New York and you have some appreciation for the emperor's new clothes, you could do a painting all in one color. And well, no, that's not true. You could do it all in one color and just have varying values in it. So I'm sorry, I misspoke about that. But monochromatic really, I guess if you're going to get persnickety about it, would mean that you are having the same intensity of your various colors. So they'd all be on the same chroma scale. But then you would end up with, well, what I consider to be a bit of a garish painting. Naive art often employs that sort of thinking. I kind of like to subdue some of the chromas and the values in order to accentuate the highest chromas and values in my focal area. One plays off the other. And I find, for myself, for my own sort of technique that, well, that's just what I prefer. Okay, now let's go into our greens a little bit. So we're going to add a little yellow ochre. I'm going to mix that with some yellow ochre and burnt sienna and bit of white and ultramarine blue. And if we don't have to make little strokes, let's not. We'll just put, hopefully, enough in there to keep it interesting. And not too many. Okay. Let's add a little more white to that. Seeing as we're coming forward into a bit of light. Oh, that's a pretty hard edge. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's just fine. think I'd like something more mauve, something more in this direction, but a little bit dirtier. There's a bit of a ravine here. And that ravine does not have a lot of foliage in it. That ravine has got a little bit of dirt showing through and a little bit of debris. So, unlike here where I used cobalt blue and alizarin crimson and a touch of yellow ochre, we're going to go to ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. Bit of a different purple there. Once we get rid of that light underwash, it starts to redirect our attention towards here. Not to mention the line brings your eye in a little bit. We'll add a touch of white there. Just lighten it up a little bit. Okay. Yeah, why not? While we're at it, while we're in the foreground, let's keep breaking the rules. Let's put more foreground in here. So we're going to go back away from that purple. That'll be the only strong purple slash in the foreground. We might have hints of it here or there. I don't know. Don't know. Don't have to know yet. That's another one of those decisions that I'll make once we have more actual paint on the panel. But I do know that the sun is coming at a low enough angle that although this might be in the shade, the top of the trunks may be in the shade, this entire trunk may be in the shade because it's pushed back. This one I think at the bottom of the trunk will catch a little bit of light, which means I don't think we have to be afraid to indicate some light on the ground below it. So we're at yellow ochre here. Almost pure yellow ochre. This little bit of bush will be in the shade as well, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We are going to try to get in a couple of interesting strokes. That's all right. Okay. Now for some titanium white and yellow ochre. Let's allow a little more sunlight to catch this in the foreground. And at the end of the painting, I may very well give it more of the same, but for the moment, that'll do. I'm tempted to bring this up Maybe I will. Okay, now back to our yellow ochre. And this is all very warm green, warmer, toned down, lower chroma. I think what I might do is make my green here, rather than using ultramarine blue and yellow ochre. Let's shoot for a little bit of cobalt blue and yellow ochre. That's what we used in the sky. But in the sky we went heavy on the cobalt blue. And a hint of yellow ochre. Now we have considerably heavier dose of yellow ochre in our mix, and we still have a little bit of. We still also have a little bit of burnt sienna in it. So it's not too violent to change from here to here. It's a bit, not much though. Don't need to worry about it. Okay, more cobalt blue. And of course, if I were to add white to this, we would come close to these colors. But we're not going to do that. Okay, I'm not too fond of how yellow that one is. And that's a bit yellow too, so we'll just knock it down a bit. I think we're okay down there. All right, let's go back to almost straight yellow ochre. Not almost straight yellow ochre, just actually straight yellow ochre. Let's bridge those two areas. Okay, like that. So that the distinction between this grass and that grass is not too strong. Maybe that was a little bit too drastic of removing of the yellow ochre there. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. See, in where you have these dark spots, these cracks, if they're broad enough, I might take a touch of this purple and just lay it in the odd spot. Because it does, in a roundabout way, unify color here, and in general that works with the entire painting. You don't want too large a block of outlier color in one area and not have it show up in other areas. You almost, the full complement of color that's on your mixing area or on your palette will be used in various areas scattered throughout the painting. It provides some unity of color to the thing. And I've mentioned this before when I was giving instruction, and then somebody would come, because I would often accompany instruction with a demo, and somebody would come to my painting later and would say, well, you have this blue here. Where I don't see that blue anywhere else in the painting. Now, I probably just didn't explain myself well enough. What I meant was not that this exact chroma and value and same proportion of blue to yellow ochre to white would be used elsewhere. It's not the final mix of color that you might find elsewhere. Rather, it is the constituents of that mix of color. So of here, we have yellow ochre. I have yellow ochre here. Yellow ochre is going to show up in a lot of places. I have cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is used here. Probably in these cracks. Probably in a bit of the shady parts here and there. We have white. Well, white's used throughout the painting wherever it's required, basically. And that's a value changer. It's not a color changer. You know, and this exact purple, well, yeah, okay, again, cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, yellow ochre. Of that mix, we'll have a little bit of alizarin crimson, likely, possibly, in these trees. Here we have a lot of burnt sienna. There's already burnt sienna in the greens here. You know, so it's not to say that there has to be burnt sienna in the sky, or you know, ultramarine blue in the sky. It's just to say that you have this meshing of various constituents out of the tube, then combined in certain ways in different proportions on your palette before you go back and play with it on the panel. Now, obviously, the exception to that is when you want something to really pop. Like in my case, it's usually going to be a grain elevator or a red shed of some sort. In which case, that red shed employs a lot of different reds that you may very possibly not find anywhere else on the painting. But odds are very good that if I paint a very strong red shed, you are going to at least find purples elsewhere, you know, more toned down mauves or what have you. You might find something in this nature in the shadow. You might find something in this nature in the shadow, you know, a little more distant shadow. They are still related to reds. They still require ultramarine blue, in many cases, a bit of cad red medium. So you still have that meshing of colors. You still have that overlap and that unity of color. If you were to simply paint a red shed and the rest of the painting contained no reds whatsoever, you used only greens, then you end up with an entirely different style of painting. In fact, pretty much a different genre of art. But you do lose much of that unity. Okay, I think we're going to leave it at that for now. I'll back up, I'll square off the camera, as I often do. Clickety click. Okay. Back a little bit, back a little bit. Yeah, I'm glad we didn't decide to, I'm glad we set that aside and decided to use a brush on this one. Talk to you soon, guys. Have a good day.